So much for staying with us. Now, against the backdrop of strains in Nigeria's economy arising from the dependence on oil for government revenue, Nigeria's non-oil exports rose 19.6% to $3.25 billion. That's in the first half of 2025 from $2.7 billion recorded in the corresponding period of 2024. That's H1 2024. Disclosing this late last week was Mrs. Noye Ayeni, who's the CEO of the Nigerian Export Promotion Council. She said the impressive performance was due to global demand for products such as cocoa and urea, as well as government's trade initiatives and regional trade deals. Mrs. Ayeni said the volume of non-oil exports increased 4.04 million metric tons from 3.83 million metric tons in the first half of 2024. Products such as cocoa beans, urea, fertilizer, and cashew nuts dominated exports, with cocoa accounting for around 35% of total export value. My guest is Dr. Muda Yusuf, is the CEO, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprises. Help us to discuss this further. It's good to see you on the show. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you very much, Tolu.
Yes, I think I should ask you what you make of this impressive, according to the NEPC, impressive performance, 19% higher than what we had in the same period of 2024. Would you say we are beginning to get export right?
Yes, I think we can say so, because these are indications of some of the dividends of the current reforms. Even though when we have this kind of conversations, people don't often link it to the reforms that are going on. Before now, if you have exported products worth maybe $100,000, for instance, what you get in terms of Naira equivalent will be 45 million Naira. Today, for export worth $100,000, we are talking about 150 million Naira. So the point I'm making is that the reform that has taken place in the foreign exchange market had a significant positive impact on the export sector, particularly non-oil exports. Because one of the advantages, even though depreciation is not always a good thing, I'm talking of currency depreciation, but it has its benefits. And one of the benefits of depreciation is that it provides an incentive to boost exports, because it makes your products cheaper and it incentivizes a lot of demand. So from the reform point of view, particularly foreign exchange reform, the impact on export has been significant. And that is part of the result of what we are seeing. This is just about formal exports. If you look at the informal sector space, it's amazing the amount of export that is going on. You need to go to a Buteru or go to Mile 2 or go to some of these border communities. You will see the amount of products that are being moved out, both manufactured, semi-manufactured, even agricultural products. So the reform has had a major impact, positive impact, on non-oil exports. If you talk to any exporter, they will tell you how the returns on exports has really, improved significantly. The second point is that the reform that has been introduced by the central bank about liberalizing the inflow of forex. Under the former CBN dispensation, as an exporter, you bring your export process at what they then call the official rate, which was 450 Naira to the dollar. But today, you are free to bring in your export and exchange it, export process, and exchange it at whatever the market rate is. So that impediment in terms of the inflow of export process, that has been removed. That has been another major transformation that has taken place that has benefited the non-oil export sector. Then, of course, we are seeing now some improvement in terms of diversification of even the export portfolio. In your background report, you talked about export of urea, fertilizer. Dangote is coming up strongly in that area now. And in a matter of few months, we'll be seeing even bigger figures in terms of export of fertilizer, because Dangote has assured us that by the time he's done with his fertilizer project, the totality of African continent will not need to import fertilizer. You can imagine the impact of that on our forex inflow. The same thing is happening with the polypropylene investments, the petrochemicals in the Dangote refinery. Polypropylene is a major raw material that is used by the manufacturers, both in the pharmaceutical industry, chemical industries, and the plastic industries. We're expecting a bumper export, even from that too, by the time the plant is completed. So a lot of transformation is going on as far as exports and non-oil export is concerned. And don't forget, this conversation we are having is about exporting goods. We are not talking about exporting services. Services export. And we are doing amazing things as far as services export is concerned. When you hear that we have diaspora remittances of close to $20 billion annually, it's coming from services export. Although when the export promotion reports all of this, this is not properly captured. And I think we should begin to have that kind of report, either from the NBS or from the Export Promotion Council, or both. Because we have a lot that is happening in terms of export services with regard to the entertainment industry, the music industry, the sports industry, financial services, IT, ICT, and so on and so forth. A whole lot is happening in that space. So the non-oil export space is performing very well. Of course, it can perform better, because if you look at the totality of our exports, oil is still very dominant. Oil is still accounting for between 85 to 90%. But the reality is that a whole lot is happening in the non-oil export space. I must also give credit to the institutions, I'm talking of agencies that are saddled with the promotion of export, like the Export Promotion Agency. This Yeni has been doing a very good work. The customs who have been creating special export terminals, for non-oil exports. But a lot more can still be done. So these are developments that we should continue to encourage to ensure that we properly diversify our export base and strengthen our balance of payment position.
So I think we've gotten past that point where diversification was just a word. It's now really coming into effect. Is that what you're saying, CEO? That's one. Then on the other side, the demand for Nigerian products by other countries also seems to be on the high side. We are seeing Asian countries, demanding our goods. We've seen, likes of Japan, even Brazil and all. But my question really around that would be, what does that mean with regards to Trump's tariff on our exports to the U.S.? Is that going to shield us a bit from that, the effect of that?
No, first of all, let me address the first part of the question. So Africa and Nigeria, of course, is an organic country. When you are talking about organic products, the best place for it, this country has practically tripled, if not increased by more than 4 or 5 folds. Because it's cheaper now to sell to neighboring countries, unlike what we used to have in those days. So this currency differential, which as a result of the foreign exchange reform, is bringing a lot of revolution to trade within the sub-region and within the African continent. So we have a whole lot of advantage. If only we can improve on the structural impediments. I'm talking of removing all the regulatory and structural impediments that we have. Of course, we will do much better than that. Now, talking about the States, and we have the largest diaspora population in the United States. A lot of our diaspora remittance also come from there. So that is the biggest challenge that I have as far as our relationship with the United States is concerned. So the tariff issue is not such a significant issue. And in any case, it's just 15%. 90% of what we export is also exempted. And when you compare our tariff imposition by US with what you have in South Africa, for instance, which is 30%, and we also have other countries, that are being slammed with 30%. Some even attracting 40% tariff. So it's not such a fundamental issue. The bigger issue is this tariff issue. The visa issue.
All right, DG, before I let you go, CEO, our trade policy and investment policy is what some analysts have also argued that we need to look at, particularly as we try to also even address inflation. Say we need to do a bit of review around that. I don't know if you agree to that submission, or what more can we do? Like you said earlier, we could do better even with regards to exports.
Yes, trade policy is extremely very important, in addressing some of the current economic challenges. There has been a disproportionate emphasis on monetary policy, on fiscal policy, but not much conversation is taking place around trade policy, around investment policy. Those things are very critical. And one of the things we need to do is to reduce trade costs. That the cost of exporting, the cost of importing, as much as possible. That will go a long way to address some of the supply side issues that we have in Nigeria. I've seen that all the efforts to tame inflation have been largely by the monetary authorities. And they can only do so much, because there are bigger issues on the supply side. So addressing the impediments to trade, tariffs, costs, charges, and all of those things, trade facilitation issues, of course, the agencies are doing well, but they can do better. So those things are very critical, to addressing the supply side constraints, to addressing the productivity issues in the economy. The second point is that we need to look at how we can, support even our domestic industries. We cannot have a Dangote refinery, and yet we are allowing importation of petroleum products. How do you conserve foreign exchange? How do you promote energy security? How do you create jobs? How do you ensure backward integration policy? So those things are also part of trade policy. I'm not saying you should ban those importations, but there has to be some protection. There has to be some tariffs, fiscal policy protection for anybody that is producing locally, especially where you have the huge capacity to meet domestic demand substantially. These are trade policy issues that we need to deal with. Then investment policy, we need to review our investment policy. The last one we had as a very comprehensive document is the NEPC Act, which is a decree, a legislation that was first put in place in 1995, which completely liberalized everything. We should begin to revisit it. Whether you should be looking at sectors that should not be fully liberalized, sectors where you also want to restrict for your indigenous investors, sectors where you want to receive the percentage of ownership, so that you can build an economy that is inclusive. Because again, we need to be careful so that the indigenous players don't become spectators in their own economy. They have to be part of the process. And these things have to be policy driven. So these are some critical issues around investment policy, around trade policy, which we need to complement the ongoing reforms.
All right there, Amos, thank you so very much for your time on the show, as always. Interesting conversation with you, as always. I've been speaking to Dr. Muda Yusuf, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprises. Thank you so much. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.